So I'm going with the video, guys.
The people to
so
put
you
the
know.
money in this time, not the government, because I don't know if the government's got any money left.
Yeah, they're printing a lot.
Yeah, they are.
Hey, most politically sensitive, I guess, so far. Anyway, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing today?
Fabulous.
Bad?
No, I said fabulous.
Well, I picked a few books. There's a link there on the slide if you're curious. I don't work in HR, so I'm really just picking some books. These were three that I thought were interesting: Generation Z, Unleashing Capacity, and Fundamentals of HR Analytics, because there's more and more AI getting into the HR field, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then there's a blog with about 20 books on it if you're interested. So welcome to Staffing Hiring in 2020. We're talking about a couple topics: reboarding, which is a new term for some of us, and of course, staffing as we move forward into this new normal. So we have a new feature here, which is show sponsorship available. Since myself and Jeff are funding the show currently, NAVDAT is this week's show sponsor. But if you want to be on a show sponsor and help support the AutoHub show, just reach out. Disclaimer, unfortunately, legal is part of everything. So this is a disclaimer. We're not responsible for anything anyone says on the show, and we're not responsible for their opinions in any way. If you're unclear on this, you can read it on our website, but here it is in legalese. AutoHub show is for the guest, not the host. It's your show. Please mute or unmute yourselves. You can also click raise your hand if you have a question. We are moderating the chat box and we'll call on you. There's a wealth of knowledge and experience on the call, so let's share ideas and respect each other's time. All AutoHub participants have agreed to be open and sharing ideas and with others using those ideas. Absolutely no selling, please. We have a show on Fridays for selling. That's not this show. AutoHub is an open discussion with a focus on improving business. We value everyone's input, speak up and bring value. Don't be afraid to brainstorm ideas and ask questions. Be respectful of everyone's time. After all, we're all busy professionals. Please do your best to stay on topic on the call. Don't forget to challenge our speakers and help them bring value on the show. Vendor Speak, we're booking sessions in October. Vendor Speak sessions are recorded and available on our website and YouTube channel. Reach out to Jeff Pullo and schedule a Vendor Speak session today for free. The new enhancements to Vendor Speak deliver results. Stay tuned for more enhancements to the show and sponsorship opportunities. Maybe, Jeff, you can talk a little bit about Barry's show from last week.
Well, thanks, Ian. Last week we had Barry Jordan of White Glove Marketing, who's joining us right now. And it was a tremendous show. And Barry, I've got to commend you because you did just an amazing job in promoting it, because, of course, it was your show. And it was well attended and some great feedback, and obviously a tremendous product. Because if I was still in a dealership, Barry, I'd buy it like that. It was great. And not just because I like it, but because it's a good product. And the show, it went over very well, and a great interaction from everybody on there. And it was well done, and it worked out. It sounds like it worked out very well for you.
Yeah, no, it did, and there's obviously some things that you and I can chat about a little bit later, and actually what worked and what we could change a little bit different next time. Maybe share that with some of your future guests and future sponsors.
Perfect. Well, I'm working on a best practices list for people to share with vendors. So any feedback from anybody at any time is always appreciated.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks. So on today's show, we have Ben Baker. Marianne Kempe couldn't make the show. We have Sandra Conrad and Mark from Mercedes-Benz. So we're going to start with Ben Baker. So Jeff, maybe you can start with introducing Ben.
What I did hear was Marianne couldn't make it because there was a giant windstorm in Winnipeg, and only the people that have really good connections around it were able to attend. So not meaning to diss Marianne, something came up. So joining us, our first guest today is Ben Baker from it's a multiple talented gentleman, a brand consultant, marketer, business consultant. He's the host of a leadership development podcast host for hire. And he posts some tremendous stuff on this topic today on HR and reboarding. So without further ado, Ben, tell us a little bit more about yourself and continue from there.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I've been in the marketing and branding business for 25 years. And over the last 10, we've really looked at how do we brand companies inside the company? How do we get people to understand, how to engage, retain, and grow employees? How do we build leadership that can listen to, understand, and value employees and allow the company to grow? It's all about being able to tell the brand story effectively. And we do that in a series of ways. We do that with leadership training. We do that with brand storytelling training, helping companies understand what their story is and how to tell it effectively. And we do that through creating customized podcasts for companies where we produce and host them for them. So our job is to sit there and allow companies to create an authentic story of their brand. It's probably the best way of putting it.
One beautiful thing about having you on board is us being obviously an auto dealership, automotive related show. It's kind of nice to have somebody who has some automotive connections, but also the real world.
Yeah.
And so tell me, what's the biggest mistake you see in bringing people back to businesses and specifically dealership staff, bringing staff back?
Well, the biggest deal, and this goes beyond the auto business, and I'm seeing this across the board. People over the last 6 months have done things with Band-Aids and duct tapes. 6 months ago, we just sent everybody home. We said, okay, we need to keep everybody safe. We're going to just send people home. We're just going to have them work from home. And there wasn't a lot of thought to it because no one's ever seen this before. So we said, grab your laptop, grab your phone, go home, and we'll deal with it. And a lot of things have changed in those 6 months. Policies have changed, procedures have changed. How we engage with clients changed, how we engage within the office changed, how our communication is done has changed. Maybe our value statement has changed because of the different things that have come up over the last 6 months. And the problem is, if we're not taking the time to let our staff know what the changes are, why they've happened, and how they affect them, people are going to revert to the old way of doing things. And when they do that, there's no step forward. And that's what we really need to do. We need to realize that there has been a diametric shift. The way that we did business a year ago is not the way we do business now, and it's certainly not the way we're going to do business in the future. I mean, we were talking off air about the fact that, well, we don't have to go to an in-person meeting anymore. We can do things online. We can go take a virtual shopping tour of a mall online or a car online, and we don't really have to go to a dealership. Well, how does that affect the dealerships? How does that affect the salespeople, the customer experience people, everybody within the office? And how do we be effective moving forward? So it's really important that companies sit there and say, okay, what has changed? Why has it changed? And how is it going to affect us? And how are we going to be, viable moving forward? And how are we going to thrive?
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. It's the biggest challenge for the next 6 months to a year for leadership of dealerships with their people.
Yeah. And it really comes down to leadership have to realize that there's been a diametric change. I mean, the old sales model, the old service model has got to change because people are, there's trepidation coming into the dealerships. There's real trepidation coming into the dealership. It's trepidation going into anybody's office. Nobody really wants to walk into a dealership anymore because they're sitting there going, okay, is it clean? Is it safe? Whatever. Businesses have to be able to demonstrate in viable ways, and whether that's videos or whether that's, different types of direct mail, whether that's, getting people on the phone, whatever they need to do, that it's safe to come into the office. And this is what we're doing to make sure that we keep you safe. And this is how we can create an experience that's not only going to keep you safe, but is going to make you want to come and buy a car from us. So dealerships have to sit there and say, the old dialing for dollars, say everybody come in, everybody come in, everybody come in, may not work anymore. People are far more interested in looking at different ways of getting the message across. What is that new message? How do we need to reach out to our people? How do we stay current, and how do we relate to people in a way that they want to be related to?
Sure. It's very funny because one thing I've noticed is the car business in most places right now is on fire, and dealerships are selling at a level actually higher than they were pre-COVID last year at the same time. Yet they're not. Many of them haven't brought back all their staff. Mm-hmm. And why do you think that is? And I mean, not just dealerships. I'm seeing it in businesses all around that they don't have enough staff.
And that's a great question. I mean, why have they not brought back the staff? And that's going to lead to service issues moving forward. And companies have to sit there and look at what's the short term and what's the long term. The sale of a car has become transactional. I mean, the commission on a car today versus what it was 20 years ago is completely different. It is, there's just not the same margin in the car. It's the aftermarket, it's the service, it's all those type of things that really bring it off. But if we're not having great experience across the board in our dealership, people will go somewhere else, whether that's online service, whether that's phone, whether that's, in person, whatever. We need to have great customer experience. And that takes people, especially if you're selling more and more cars. You can't keep people on hold. You can't, do those type of things. You need to be able to have the people that can actually relate, because people buy from people. They don't buy from dealerships. They buy because of a personal relationship with a person, and they buy because they trust somebody. And that requires, good trained people that not only understand how to sell in a new way, but also know how to provide that customer experience. So when the car is sold, it's handed over to the service department in a really good way. And the service people are trained in the customer experience to be able to make sure not only that the car gets in and out for the oil change, but the person who's doing it feels that was an easy and fun experience, and not just a hassle to bring the car in and feel they're going to get jacked every time they walk in the dealership.
It's quite funny because, sorry, Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I talk to dealers throughout North America every day, and I guess the number one feedback I would have for dealers is get rid of this multiple selection voicemail, whatever it is. Yeah, I've had dealerships, believe it or not, where it's like, okay, do you want to buy a car? And then are you existing customer or past customer? And then do you want to buy a new car or used car? And then eventually you get to a person and it goes, oh, you're in the wrong department. Now, the best one I've ever heard, though, and this is one that I think anyone can use, is before it even hits those numbers, basically there's a message from the dealer that says, listen, you're actually going to be talking to a live person very shortly. And that's all there is. There isn't this 1, 5, 25, 45, whatever. But the worst thing that I've seen, and this is not by any means a dig on Ontario-based dealers, but Ontario dealers seem to have the lowest staffing levels of any dealerships in Canada. So what happens is when you get to a person in an Ontario dealership, you're surprised. There's actually a person to answer the phone. Like, no matter what you push, there's nobody to answer the phone. And to me, that's a huge mistake from a dealership perspective. If all you do is invest in some people to physically answer the phone, people are panicked. People are worried. They want a solution, but more importantly, they want to talk to somebody. And I think that that's not unreasonable. Like,
Yeah, I
you need that. Right?
We're at a world where people want an experience. We're in the experience economy.
Yeah. We
are definitely in an experience economy, and people want to be treated special. They want to be walking in, and they want to say, "Oh, yes, Mr. Baker, your car is ready." They want to know that you know who they are, and that the car has been detailed, it has been washed, and it's ready to go. Mr. Baker, your car's going to be another 5 minutes. Would you like to go sit in the waiting room? Would you like a cup of coffee? Would you like sugar with that or not? And having the people in the office that can actually do that is an important thing. I mean, you can't walk into any business across North America, go up the elevators, open the door, and there isn't a receptionist sitting there. And the receptionist is sitting there not just to answer the phones, but to make people feel welcome and make people feel valued. And dealerships have to think about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, when you look at it, it doesn't matter if it's a Highline dealer or a mainline dealer or whatever, those little things make a huge difference. I mean, one of the best, signs I've seen at the dealership recently it's a stop sign that's at the door when you're leaving. And it's like, if you're not 100% satisfied, talk to the manager right now. Here's his phone number. And it's like a big stop sign on the sticker on the door, which I thought was hilarious, but it's good. Anyway, we got to move on since it's time. So I'm going to introduce Mark. Mark met through LinkedIn. He works at a Mercedes-Benz dealer in Winnipeg. Is that right, Mark?
Absolutely. Pinnacle Auto Group is our main group. We have got our flagships, Mercedes-Benz Winnipeg. We also have Focus Hyundai out this way, which is a legacy dealership, one of the first Hyundais, or the first Hyundai in our market. We also have a fantastic luxury body shop, Pinnacle Collision Center, that does some high-end, great work. And then we have a little body shop affiliated with Focus Hyundai that does really good work as well too. And we just acquired last year Kenora Hyundai in the little sunset vacation cottage country of Northern Ontario just recently.
Cool, congrats. So tell us a little bit about your experience in the auto industry as an HR professional.
I kind of came in pretty hard and fast as a young individual. I came out of school with a significant amount of education. I decided to go where the difficulty is. I like challenges. That lands me in the automotive industry naturally. Here we are. I've been in my lead HR role, walking in the executive circle for about 6.5, 7 years now. 2 organizations. One's Crown Auto Group out of our local market here. And now I'm with Pinnacle and our owner, Brian Lowe's, with Pinnacle. It's been absolutely amazing.
So obviously, like everybody else, thanks for that. Obviously, like everybody else, people laid off or furloughed a bunch of staff. What was your experience like reboarding after you had to bring some of those people back?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. So we were the first ones in our market to actually let people go. So we were ahead of all the bigger groups. We just saw that, taking care of our people is our number one thing. And if you ever hear anyone from our organization, our executive group, culture is number one. And we live by that. And we truly feel taking care of our people is very important. So it was very important even before we got to the reboarding side of things in order to have processes in place in order to do that. So as an HR team, we made sure that we documented everyone, whether it was they were going on a layoff situation, if it was a termination situation, if it was holding on, whatever the heck it was, we documented everything and made sure everything was absolutely seamless. We made sure everyone had their letters done. We had their ROEs done. Everything was just amazing. So the number one thing we really wanted to make sure is that the experience was effortless and painless for our employees, and that's what we really did. And it paid dividends. So as we brought people back, I mean, I hear of some really challenging stories some people have had within the industry and other industries as HR people, but we've done a great job because we focused on all that process and all that documentation ahead of time, and we tracked people. We called people as soon as we let someone go. We gave them regular updates. Hey, this is what we're headed. This is how the policy changed. And as you guys know, it changed daily. And we're sitting here watching streamcasts from the Prime Minister, from our Premier every day to make sure that we did things right and can make it as seamless as possible.
Right.
What we kind of found with bringing people back on was a couple things. And this kind of goes down to another question that you're probably going to ask me, is that everyone's COVID experience is different. Every single person that we see on all these tiles right now talking, all you guys have had something different, no matter what it is. So maybe you got reduced hours, maybe you work from home, maybe you didn't work from home, maybe you had childcare, maybe someone close to you got it, maybe you had to get tested, all that type of thing. And with that, you have to bring in the hypersensitivity as an HR individual to make sure that people come in really seamlessly and like feel comfortable. The word is empathy, right? So we really, really strive ourselves on being an empathetical team here, always putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. And that's really kind of what we really kind of noticed, is that everyone's experience is different. And there was a lot of anxiety wrapped around it. So as far as the reboarding goes, what we noticed is that within the first 2-3 weeks, and people came back at different increments. So we had people that were here, we went through it in the first 2 weeks, everyone was laid off and we were through it. And then we started slowly bringing people back. When we started bringing people back, the questions came out, the concerns came out. What are you guys doing to protect us? What's happening? And then from there. So what I noticed mainly was an eye to safety. And I also really, really noticed that there was significant anxiety, and they actually had to wash off of people. And it took some people 2 to 3 weeks to do. It's interesting.
So obviously, it sounds like you're an organization that has a real impact on culture. How do you feel COVID has impacted your corporate culture?
Yeah, it's actually very strange. I think first things first is like the whole COVID experience has provided everyone reflection and consciousness of their life and what's happening. So, where am I headed in my life and things like that. So we have these questions. What really happened was there's multiple things that happened that I noticed. Number one is the people that were here, we got extra productivity out of them. All of a sudden, because of the anxiety and the insecurity surrounding whether or not they're off or they're going to have a job out of it, the rock stars are rock stars, and our average people turned into rock stars, and it was just absolutely unreal what happened. And started, like, it's almost like we didn't have COVID, really, on the business side of things, which was rather impressive. But that leads to burnout. So then the questions start coming, right? Well, is this for me anymore? Do I want to be a part of this? Is this my career? Our organization is very, very young. Millennials run the show here, including our owners, an old millennial. I'm an old millennial, and it's a completely different thing. And we're dealing with Gen Z also. So it's a very young, so everyone starts like evaluating their life, and that kind of had an impact. And like we had to provide value again. We had to make sure that we provided that. Another thing I really noticed was compliance. So as an HR person, we're always trying to get our T's crossed and our I's dotted, and it's almost impossible in the automotive industry. If anyone's dealt with a salesperson before, you might know this. But that being said, it's always very, very challenging. But all of a sudden, boom, everyone's like falling in line. Everyone's doing their compliance documents. Everyone's listening to what we need to get it down. And that's actually resonated after. So I have a big health and safety initiative that Sandra might know a little bit about as well too, that I'm pushing towards. And all of a sudden I'm getting things done so much quicker, especially in that health and safety realm. It's changed quite a bit. So you get a little bit of leeway. That's what I've noticed.
So obviously it's a young organization in terms of young leadership.
Yep.
Do you have any advice to people that maybe are baby boomer or Generation X led organizations with obviously significant amount of Gen Z and millennial generations, how they can react better or interact better with maybe the younger employees that don't have the same viewpoint in some cases?
Yeah. Well, how much time do we have, right? Like, it's like talking with your kid here. So really what it is, empathy. If you're not empathetical and you make it too much business during this time, you're going to lose people. That's just the way it is. You have to put them, the whole perspective's changed, and their education level, our knowledge level, because we're obviously very internet savvy people that are on here, but the volume of consumption of information from Gen Z and millennials is absolutely astronomical. So don't try and fleece them. Don't try and give them information that's not true. Make sure you're accurate with it and be empathetical and be a human about bringing people on. That's really, really important. So that's the advice I would give to, I don't like the ageism thing. Like, I call, it's not baby boomer, it's more mature, more experienced people. That's the advice I'd give to more experienced individuals, is to just take a step back. And I know we have these businesses to run with a ton of overhead and a ton of like inventory, insurance costs, interest rates are just piling up. But that's not always the concern of the younger generations.
And one last question. What do you notice in the behaviors of employees returning to work?
Yeah, again, community, especially here. So what we kind of did, and again, we moved a little bit differently, and just to let you know, we took some sacrifices at, we have different compensation packages for various individuals all over our, like, every dealership. The leadership group, we took sacrifices in order to make sure that we kept the wash bay kids, right? We kept the shuttle drivers. We kept those guys. We did stuff to make sure that we demonstrated and kept our team together. That's very, very important. As a result of that, the camaraderie, the culture has normalized quite a bit. Everyone's on the same page. I don't have any squabbles or arguments at all. People have put things in perspective a little bit better. And like I said earlier, this is certainly a time of reflection. And people want to know whether or not they're part of your team and whether or not you're on their team. So that's very important.
What about the Highline experience versus your other stores? Was there any, notable differences that you feel?
So the luxury versus our import brand?
Yeah.
Yes, different. The thing is with the luxury brand, we have to make sure that we provide that same level of customer service all the way through the process, and you can't let that fall off. So when you watch out, you start like paring down your workforce. When you're doing luxury and when you're talking about customer service, at the end of the day, real good customer service involves people. So that's one thing that we really, focused on. We did notice that it's not so much our people that we've noticed with, but one thing that we noticed is with our clients are a little bit different too, right? The expectations of what you would call a Highline client is completely different than an import brand economy domestic. So, but as far as the team and culture goes, I noticed not too much of a difference. Again, we focus between both buildings. We really do focus on culture, and we have that. But both teams did the same thing. They just buckled down, made it happen. They have different, we've got very different demographic setups. So if you're talking about my Mercedes dealership, we're talking about a significant amount of people who have post-secondary education and very, very smart. If I talk about my other dealership, it's more, high school. They work their way up to get where they are. So they have different perspectives in life like that. So those kind of rolled in. But at the end of the day, we're also talking about Winnipeg. It's a different market. We do come together when things get really, really tough. But I didn't really find that it was too much of a difference between either the dealership, just because at the end of the day, I think that actually went down to our overall community about who we are as Winnipeggers. So, and Canadians.
Any questions from the audience? Any questions?
Well, the old saying of silence is deafening. It'll come. I can see John Latka sitting there thinking about it. So I'm moving right along because I'm also watching Sandra. She's sitting there going, oh. No, I'm just kidding. But we're going to move on. Thank you so much, Mark. That was terrific. I did my best to stop from making a comment that Mercedes-Benz no longer sells manual transmissions, and I guess now because of all the millennials. So
there's only like 4. I think I don't know. I'm probably wrong on this, but there's only like 4 or 5 products on the market that are manual anymore. Really, like in passenger vehicles.
Well, one's a Hyundai Veloster, so there you go.
Yes, that's a dog.
so joining us is
leave that. Hey, you said it's not politically correct, right? So let's do it.
Absolutely not.
I hope my boss has been watching this.
So we have Sandra Conrad joining us, who we've had before and has joined us before. And thank you so much for being here. Sandra is the HR lead at Dealer Pilot HR. And unlike Winnipeg Mercedes and your podcast for hire, it really doesn't really explain anything. So fill us a little bit in on yourself and Dealer Pilot HR and the role of HR lead.
Absolutely. So I've been in the HR space for nearly 2 decades. So can't say that I am part of that millennial bunch anymore, but there is some advantages, as Mark says, to having that experience. So Dealer Pilot HR, we provide HR automation and advisory services strictly to the automotive industry. So we focus just on this group of people. So, we are here to support you guys in that HR space and the health and safety space as well, providing automation, insights, metrics, and advisory services to you guys so that we can assist you through things just like COVID. So that's a little bit about myself as well as the organization. And I think, when we talk about the reboarding component of that, I've had the distinct privilege of speaking to a lot of dealerships, both Highline and not across the entire country. And I've seen 3 really key opportunities that both Ben and Mark have touched on. And one of that is, the idea that we really need to improve the process on documentation. So I can't say it enough. Document, document, document. And I think, and Mark talked about this a little bit, the opportunity to bring people back on and train them or retrain them. Ben mentioned it as well, that this is a different space than it was before COVID. So documentation and training are 2 really key things we need to focus on. And the last one, I've said it before, a number of you have heard me say it repeatedly, and that's the huge opportunity that COVID has given us to really focus on having your success team. And what is your success team? What does that look like? And I think, when we're reboarding, we can really start to emphasize that both in who we reboard and who we might choose not to reboard, and how we reboard those people. So they know they're part of the success team, and so that we ensure that they thrive as part of our success team.
So you mentioned a success team. So how do you manage who to keep in this team, and especially when you've got all these, what you've gone through with terminating people? It's like Mark said, there was so much work put into making sure people aren't discarded.
Right. So I think there's a few things. And Mark's touched on culture a fair bit. I think knowing who truly fits your culture is sort of that starting point. When you start to look at how you've functioned without people for the last 6 months, I know there's a lot of dealerships out there who have gone, if I've managed without you for 6 months, what exactly did you do for me before this? And it's a valid question. And I think one of the ways to really be able to assess that is to maybe take off the subjective hat and put on an objective hat and use your metrics, use your numbers, use your data, so you're making a really solid decision. So many dealerships are going through the pain of saying, but they're a lovely person. And that's great. And it's nice that you have that empathy. I think that's really important. And it's great that you like the people that are in your dealership. But if they're not productive and they're not going to drive success for the organization, then maybe it's time to help them move on to something that they're a better fit for, that will make them happy and make them want to do the things that Mark talked about, like becoming a rock star in a different place. So I think using those numbers become really important. Even if we're doing it in a gentle, kind, and empathetic way, there still needs to be a fact behind it.
Sure. No, I certainly understand that, and you touched on a very good point there. Is that maybe these people just aren't a right fit, and I know a lot of places have actually used this as an excuse to not bring people back, although many places bring back the wrong people because they are nice people and somebody likes them. But do you have any specific documents that you need to cover? Because you mentioned documentation, but when you're rehiring people or bringing them back, whatever term you want, are there specific documents you got to pay closer attention to than others?
there's a lot of them that are important for sure, but I think the three that I've seen maybe not done as well as they could be is, and Mark touched on this too, the record of employment. So making sure when you sent them out in the first place that your documentation was correct. If it wasn't, here's an opportunity to fix it and make sure that you're bringing them back under really solid terms. So if you don't have terms of employment, here's an opportunity to implement those. And I talked a little bit about training, but your training records become critical. So how do you prove that you've shown the people what your safety measures are and how they participate in the safety measures if you don't have a document trail around that? Because there have been dealerships who have been called to task on demonstrating that their staff know what they're supposed to know before they reopen their doors or before they start dealing with the public or whatever the case may be. So I think in terms of employment, making sure your government records or your compliance records are accurate and making sure that you have those training documents in place are the three biggies. I mean, there's a ton of other ones, but those are three of your big ones.
Sure. So what does that mean about training? Is this let's show them how to do this better because now we got to have barriers between us and masks?
Sorry, Jeff. It's a few things. So, every province has jurisdictional legislation in place about what is a safe workplace. And within those jurisdictions, there are very tight rules on what employees can, can't, should, and shouldn't do. So just because someone's been with you for 15 years doesn't mean they know the role anymore, and it doesn't mean they know the details of what their job is going to look like. So where the rules used to be, that sales reps greet someone within the first 15 seconds of walking in the door, in person with a handshake, all those good things. The new rules might be that they greet someone at a 6-foot distance with a wave and a hello and a mask in place. And if you can't demonstrate that you've trained them and taught them those new differences, then you're actually not compliant. And not only are you not compliant, but you're also not meeting all those things that both Mark and Ben talked about in terms of culture. So they don't know what's going on. You can't assume that people understand what is required of them under COVID if you aren't the one that has shown them what is required of them under COVID. And there are situations where staff don't want to come back because they're nervous, they're afraid, they don't think you're compliant, all of those things. If you're training them, then you're showing them what you're doing for them, and you're getting them to sign off that they understand, which means that that communication piece automatically falls into place. So as much as, there's the health and safety training, but there also may be retraining on their role. Reception's a great example of this, right? That you might have new parameters in place. You might have Ian's favorite thing. You might have new automated recordings that you put in place during COVID because your hours are different. You might have people who are doing variable roles, so they aren't always at the same extension anymore. So it can also be task focused. And it's a big initiative for a dealership to take on retraining every single employee who has walked back in your door. And
you mentioned, pardon me there, it's very funny how what you're talking about here flows right into, we got a couple questions as well, but you mentioned about people that are 15 years in their job, and being the car business, we do have to recognize the fact that many people that have moved up through the ranks in their jobs, they probably didn't get proper training. Somebody probably sat in front of a computer screen, they filled in a couple forms, and the 15-year people could actually, especially in this break, rethink what they're doing, and you don't want to lose them. You don't want to bring back somebody that's not good. Ben mentioned that every employee you lose can cost you $100,000 or more, and if they're good, probably way more. And John mentioned about what percentage of dealerships have performance standards in place. So basically, what does that mean? Are these people that are well trained in their job, worked here for ages, and what standards and how much money are you prepared to lose on them?
Well, and you're right. At the end of the day, we all need to be profitable, right? So there is that key component there too. But I think reminding them that there are performance standards and telling them that they're valued, even if they're not quite there yet, is important. But you still have to have the expectation that there's a performance standard there. And whether that's a documented performance standard, whether that is a performance metric, whether that's part of their terms of employment, or whether that's just implied, isn't really the point. I mean, as an HR professional, I like to see something that isn't just implied, but the reality is it's out there. I think saying to someone, listen, you've been here for 15 years, we value you, you've seen us through some tough stuff before, but because of COVID and because of our challenges, here's what our new measurements need to be. Are you up for the challenge, and how can I help you meet that? And it may be a self-elimination process. They may decide, even if they've been with you for a long time, that they're not up to the challenge anymore, that they've learned over the last 6 months they have other priorities in life, and that's okay. It just means that the next person you bring in, here's the opportunity to make sure they're high level, high value, high productivity people who have that same quality and commitment that you had anticipated over the last 15 years from the previous employee.
I like your comment about that's okay. It's one thing that what I like what you have to say is the fact that it is okay if somebody doesn't want to come back, even though it's expensive to lose them. It's also okay if the company doesn't want them, providing everybody handles each other properly.
Yep. Well, and realistically, if someone isn't thrilled about coming back to their career, how badly do you want them back? I mean, it's like a bad date. Do you go on it twice? You don't.
Well, some
right?
people do.
Well, okay. Fair enough. But, if there isn't that compatibility there anymore, I think we need to respect that on both sides of the fence. We just need to be very cognizant of how we handle that. And that comes back to Mark's comment about, empathy and all those good pieces, right?
I have a question from Pamela Phillip. Sandra, your program at Dealer Pilot tracks and flags who has and has not completed the training and updating skills. Is it available for the employee to look at their measurements and see whether where they are in their skills?
Yeah, so what will happen within our system is that you'll get reminders that you haven't completed certain components of your training. You'll get notification, you get a little certificate when you've completed some of the components of your training. There's all sorts of automated pieces in there so that both the manager and the employer know where all their staff stands, by department or across the organization. And each employee also knows where they stand. So if they're starting to, if they have 3 days, after reboarding to complete, a certain amount of training and they haven't done it, then they're going to get electronically harassed until they actually get their stuff together and get it done. And then, it gives the employer a little reassurance too, and it gives the employer proof that it's being done, and it gives the employee the reminder that they've got to get it done. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Of course. The other thing I heard from one dealer, and I think they're an Ontario-based dealer, is they actually on there, when you call, before you talk to a person, there was a message from the owner saying, we're really thankful that everyone is, stuck with us through this. So that to me was really stood apart from everywhere else, where it was like, not to beat a dead horse, but 156, it was like, really thank you from ownership. It was a message to everybody who calls, right? So I thought that was really, really...
well, that's humanizing the brand. I mean, that really does a great job of humanizing the brand. And it allows people to know from the very top to the very bottom that the ownership actually cares. And they're actually, as long as they stand by it, as long as it's not just words, and they actually mean it, and the actions, are compliant with whatever their talk is, then that feeds right through the organization.
And think about what that means for their employees. So if they're saying thank you to the public and every person who calls, if that's truly their culture, think about what they're doing for their staff and how that piece of gratitude will represent itself to staff, and how staff then will act in kind and have gratitude for their job and for the culture that they're a part of and what they'll give back to that dealership, right? So those things that seem small actually have a pretty big impact.
Right. What a great term, gratitude. That is that's outstanding, because not very often do you see, especially in our business, gratitude from the customers for the service they're getting, gratitude from the dealership for the staff spending their lives with them, and gratitude from the staff to the dealership for treating them well and giving them a job.
Yeah.
As someone who interviews a lot of people during this time and after this time, I can say that I've received a little bit of feedback from our market that that's important to a lot of people, and have noticed that some of the interviews I'm going through, experienced individuals that are applying to us felt that their employer didn't handle it very well sometimes, and didn't make it about the people, made it about the business very fast. And we are business people, especially automotive industry, very efficient and the rest of it. But at the end of the day, the people are essential to running your business. And I've had that feedback in interviews from candidates that it was like, they just didn't handle things well.
Well, there's a story, and I can't mention who the company is, but they fired 400 people in March over a 90-second Zoom call. They brought all the employees online and said, 400 of you people have just gotten emails saying that you are fired. Thank you very much for your service. There will be a courier at your desk tomorrow. Please return your laptop and your cell phone and everything. Click.
Wow. Granted, we're a little bit smaller of an organization, but I personally called everyone and had those individual interviews as well that I could. There's different pockets of different teams, but the majority of the people, like, as we're bringing them back, I called them for updates. And it's not easy sometimes when you don't have an answer. You're like, I'm sorry, I just don't know. I'm waiting on this whole thing, and let me process that ROE. And like, I became an expert in employment insurance overnight, which was amazing, and government benefits like immediately. So I got this whole new skill set. I'm kind of happy for that. But I'm just saying, like, it's very important, those touch points. Like, you're right. What you give is what you get in return.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, if you're terminating someone, and that Zoom example then is a great example of not meeting this requirement, you have changed someone's life.
And their families.
So like, you have just completely flipped someone's world upside down. The least you can do is pick up the phone. Mm-hmm. During COVID, having those one-on-one face-to-face meetings might not be possible, but at the very least, give them a voice and or a face to put it to, and make it private, because you never know how someone's going to react to something like that. You don't want to be doing that in a venue of 400 people. This is a very emotional, major thing for people we've let go, whether it's their own doing or not, doesn't even matter, right? It's still just treating people with respect. Is what it really boils down to. How would you like to be treated in a situation like that? You sure wouldn't like it to be in front of a big audience.
Yes.
Yeah. And one thing, it was funny because the one thing that I was listening to Sandra and Mark and talking about, the re-onboarding, is something that we didn't address, is that there are some people that it's okay if they stay back at home. There are certain employees out there, maybe not, dramatically through dealership, but there are some employees, especially when we're looking for more people to answer the phone and provide that customer experience and the training and to be able to do the appointment setting, etc., that it's okay for those people to work from home. They don't have to come to the dealership every day. And being able to have those people that you can sit there and say, where can we find those rock stars? Where do we find those people that, they want to work from home, they're really good at it, they've got the phone skills, they can do the appointment setting, they can answer the phone and be that frontline voice of the people and be able to transfer it to the right person and do the handoff within the dealership. How do we build those successes into our teams to be able to do that? Not every single person has to come back to work. And we need, as leadership, we need to sit there and say, how do we find the best people? How do we level up the company? How do we make the company better? And just because your dealership's in Winnipeg or Kenora or Vancouver or whatever, doesn't mean that there are people that have to live in those cities that can be incredible employees for you. With the new technology and with everything that's out there, having somebody that's in Kelowna when you're in Vancouver might be a great asset.
Yeah,
I think it's a valid point, Ben, too, because even with the people who you have pre-existing during COVID, when they're having those conversations, flip the question on its head. It's not, how can I have them work from home? It's, why can't they work from home?
Exactly.
What's the barrier to having them work from home? And interestingly enough, one of the things I found out was early on, for a lot of dealerships, it was the lack of technology.
Yeah. That
they were not prepared to have people work from home. They didn't have laptops. They had desktops. they didn't have a VPN or any other virtual space to upload files and share information and what have you. And when you push a little bit, it's actually easy to find solutions to some of those things.
Yep.
And they're long-term solutions. I would challenge that if you have a desktop with a tower and your monitor's not a flat screen, maybe it's time for an upgrade anyway. And when you do that upgrade, make it a laptop. Let them, progress to a space where going forward, that flexibility to work from home will be there. Because going forward, we're going to have this challenge again. This is not our first time facing a pandemic. It's not our first time facing, work at home challenges. We saw it, even with SARS, we saw similar situations come up. So I think challenging dealerships to move to a mindset where it's why can't I, as opposed to how can I?
Mm-hmm.
How could I possibly do this? No, it's why can't you do this? And when you flip that on its head, the answer, interestingly enough, came back that it was like, oh, yeah, I guess I can. I just never really thought of it that way.
Right.
So it's expanding the mindset.
Yeah, some of that is a lot of the mindset of maybe I'm going to brand it as the older generation, where they want people at their desks, feet flat on the floor, working at their desk, whatever, where other people are starting to realize that, you're more effective with a 10-minute walk in the middle of your day and with a fresh head and fresh air in your lungs. And it's just a different mindset completely. And that's a lot for some people to embrace, that they can't see their people working every day, hands on their desk, right?
That's a control thing. In a lot of respects, it's a control thing. It's, I did it this way, so you have to do it this way.
Well, not only
the
that,
world's changed.
You've got people who say maybe I'm more at risk from this because of health issues, and maybe I just don't want to come back in. Like, I just don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable. I mean, I have two friends who live on the island who work for the government, and the government is basically like, "Are you comfortable coming back?" Like, that's their sales pitch. And I'm basically saying, what are they going to do when, like, say half the people never want to come back? Like, they'd rather work from home. So I think that's going to be a new problem for sure.
My wife will not be back in the office now until March 2021. Yeah. That's the earliest they want her back in the office because of the job that she does. Because she moves from office to office to office, they want her to stay home until 2021.
Well, and I think Gary hit on something very valuable, which goes back to Mark's comment about Gen Z, whatever you'd like to call them, depending on which country you're calling in from. And that's just because you did it that way, right? Does not mean that's going to be attractive to talent going forward, which is a whole other conversation, right? Like, we could be here all day just talking about that. But it's something to remember that because it worked for you does not mean it will work from them. And you are actually doing yourself some harm as leadership, because you've now cut off that whole talent pool by forcing them to do something the way you did it, as opposed to what might work well for them.
Just to speak to that, Sandra, you take, for example, traditionally, somebody goes on a maternity leave, and then they spend the next maybe 2 or 3 years taking a break from their career while they raise their child or whatever the case may be. Extremely talented people, very, very viable to the organization, but just didn't fit the traditional mold, where now they can put in 6 hours a day working from home, still able to tend to the family and do those duties that they choose from, but you're able to bring that talent back into your pool and utilize it.
Yeah, great
Great
point.
example.
I'm running a little low on time, so I just want to go through quick slides. Thanks very much to everybody. Next show is going to be service drive training. We're going to have Christine Mitchell, Amanda Troop, Madeline Gauthier from Hunter Engineering, maybe someone else from Hunter, and then Dave Floyd from Fixed Ops. Chris Collins hasn't confirmed yet, but he's out of California. You may be familiar with Chris. I'm hoping to have him on the show as well. So,
and of course, coming up this Friday is another one of our famous vendor speaks. And this time we have Jason Silverberg of our lovely sponsor today, NABVAT, who's going to spend some time telling us about how awesome his product is and why you should get that and dump all those big guys out there and everything else. And that'll be Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Central, and of course, noon in the center of the universe. What's unique about Vendor Speak, as I said earlier, it's not just a live Zoom show. It's not this, and when we talk about technology, who'd have thought a year ago that we'd all be doing this sort of thing? But after we do this, we have a very highly professional editor that edits the recording, and we share it on our various social media platforms, including our new YouTube channel. And we provide you with a well-edited recording for you to use as part of your presentation. And again, Barry has done very well with it. And I hear that there's like 20 more people that are just lined up for it. So our vendor speak shows, we're now filling up for the balance of 2020. We have only a couple free shows left. And as Ian said earlier, we'd like to recoup some of our expenses because this is funded by the Nethercott Polo Bank. And please reach out to me directly, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you all for attending. We greatly appreciate it.
And upcoming shows in October: Frontline Roundtable Fixed Ops, Frontline Roundtable Variable Ops, training seminars and promotions, omni-channel communication, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's about platforms and technology. So the reason for that show was there's all kinds of products out there. So I've corralled a bunch of guests to speak to the different products so that dealers and people in the industry have more information, because these products change. I probably get pitched a new one every week by different companies. In November, data and results, digital retail, really talking about, is digital retail worth the investment? What is the actual data saying? Operational savings for car dealers. So if you're interested in expanding your dealership or looking for funding sources, we're going to have a bunch of different people on that show. Are you staffing correctly? So that's really about staff savings and, where should you be as you move into the new year? And then what customer experience is all about. So we're going to have some really exciting speakers for that. Stay tuned for more details on the website as we firm those up. And then we're going to be doing some interesting shows in December. Stay tuned for those. They should be very interesting. Any final thoughts from any show guests or Jeff?
Thanks, everybody.
Still got 4 minutes.
Ben and Mark, I appreciate you guys joining us. You're new to the fold, and hopefully had a great experience. And Ben, we're going to be having you on Vendor Speak, and we're looking forward to that. And we appreciate any different viewpoints, because one problem with the car business is we tend to suffer from it's a quasi-incestuous relationship, because we all get together and we all talk about things, and car HR people, and boy, 10 years ago, HR for a car dealership was like, yeah, that's the I worked for a group where the CFO was the HR guy. And
I'm sure that still exists.
Oh, it definitely does. And professionals like yourselves are making a change, and making it, in the words of the departed George H.W. Bush, kinder, gentler business. So thank you all.
Any final thoughts from anybody? Ben, Pamela, Barry, Mark?
You know what? The final thought I would give everybody is take the time to realize what can be, not what was, but what can be. Because we're at a stage where we can almost reinvent ourselves. We can almost try any new thing and try it and see it there and go, okay, does this work? And it's what if, not say, why not? So let's take the time and sit there and say, okay, how can we be creative? How can we talk to our people? How can we sit there and say what opportunities are out there that we hadn't even thought of? Because they are out there, and our customers are looking for them.
Yeah, that's good words, Ben. Because we're so many times we got so comfortable with our processes and just things that we were doing, and that's just why we do them. And Mark, I was thinking while you were talking that it's surprising that we had people on staff that we didn't feel were efficient enough to bring back, but yet we put up with them for how many years or months or whatever the case may be. Now all of a sudden we have this opportunity, I'm going to call it, and now we're saying, nah, they just don't fit the team. Well, they didn't fit the team before COVID either, so why do we have them, right? So anyway, I thought that just while you were speaking, I thought of that, and I thought I'd just share.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
I think the last thing I'm just going to throw in is that I think being conscious through this whole thing is, at the end of the day, if you take care of your people, take care of your business. That's the bottom line of it. And if you as long as you pull a very authentic, empathetical approach to situations like this, and don't blanket everyone when it comes to stuff like this. Of course, we have our blanket processes, but each case is different. And knowing that, I think you'll have a lot more success leading your dealership and your teams.
Final thing I just want to say to everybody, by the way, is is every week we're seeing a different group of people here on Auto Hub Show and Vendor Speak, and it's starting to come across. Yesterday, there were some people who met on our show, and they're now doing YouTube shows out there in the world, and I mean outside of Canada and the States, and they're talking about how they owe this whole thing to Ian introducing them into the show and all that stuff, and hopefully 6-8 months from now we're going to have a giant reunion show. So thank you all. You're making this a great platform.
And any thoughts, Sandra?
I was just going to say, I agree with Mark that you need to be empathetic. You need to realize that these people are individual people. I mean, yes, you have a process, but it's a process. It's not the Bible. You need to be able to be flexible and courteous to each individual that you're dealing with. It, whether that's bringing them back or not bringing them back doesn't really matter. But you also need to make sure that you're doing that within the context of having a successful business. So, yes, empathy is critical. But don't mistake that for being, for lack of a better word, a pushover. Barry hit the nail on the head. These people weren't a fit in the first place. So you can be empathetic and you can be considerate and you can still make those solid business decisions that are going to make you a profitable organization. Because you can't keep the ones that are helping you if you aren't making a profit.
Mhm.
No question.
Well, in sense of time, that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks very much, everybody. And anyone who is obviously a show speaker, you can hang tough if you have a couple minutes to, yeah. And thanks very much for watching.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.
Wow.